Sheldon Kirby. Sheldon is a former teacher in a community called Norris Arm. And Norris Arm is, I think it's about 45 minutes west of Gander. Little place I've been to many times. And I think he's got some very interesting observations about what it was like to be a school teacher during 9/11. Sheldon?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests. Thanks for the invite. Now I'm just, I used to be Mr. K at the school, and for a few days I ran the Hillview Academy Hotel for a group of passengers from Delta DL49. Currently I'm with the Board of Directors of the Norris Arm Heritage Society, and I'm the curator for the living history of 9/11. We've a room devoted to our community and what they've done, and the passengers, their responses, and we have video, slideshows, and storyboards. So I never brought any photos with me because I'm trying to get you to come and see it. Right? And you can see that for free because it's such a wonderful exhibit. Every time I think about 9/11 event, I think of the REM song, "It's the End of the World as We Know It," because it was. The world changed. In North America, we didn't have the same security that they did in Europe. We were not used to seeing police with military-style rifles in airports or at train stations. And after the 9/11 event, it became commonplace. Every large building you went into, you had to go through a magnetic scanner and so on. So when Brian told me to tell my story about 9/11, there's no possible way that I could do so without talking about the people of Norris Arm and who put their lives on hold for a group of 150 to 200 stranded individuals from all over the world. Now, Brian, I rewrote this bloody story about a half dozen times. I probably wore out 3 crayons doing it, so what do you use to write a story? Okay, so at the time of 9/11, Norris Arm had a population of 911 people. True. Statistically speaking, some would claim that it was an economically depressed region. We've got no hotels or restaurants, malls, chicken or burger joints. We had a gas bar, a grocery store, a liquor outlet that was used quite frequently, and a bunch of service groups. What the town lacked in amenities, it made up for with big hearts, a strong will, and a Christian belief system that's just unreal. When asked to care for the needs of a large group of strangers, the answer was bring it on. So we had one. I got back to the school. I do have a couple of stories. That's not my pen. Okay, I do have a couple of stories. One about myself is when I came back to the school from lunch. We were allowed to eat lunch at that time. Teachers don't usually get lunch these days. But I went to the library and I was talking with a staff member and a few students that were in my junior high class. And I was looking and the television was playing and I saw, geez, I saw this plane flying into a building. And I said, boy, that's a really high-def video game. And the teacher looked at me, he says, Shell, that's real time. That's happening in New York now. Well, you know, it's just like you got a kick in the pants. And so what would you do as a history teacher? You go and you grab all your students, you bring them in the library and say you're watching history as it happened, take notes. They didn't take any notes, but they sure knew what happened. So, like everybody else, I watched that over and over and over again until I was almost desensitized to the video. And that's important to another part of the story. Then I get a call later in the afternoon from the town clerk, and she says, well, we've got a plane load of passengers going to come in. Can you look after them at the school? We want to bed them down. No problem. The principal calls, close the school, we're going to do all fine. So my wife gets on the phone, calls a few parents, more than a few, most of them, to get air mattresses, blankets, pillows, the whole deal, because we didn't know what was going to happen. It wasn't until later the next day that the Salvation Army showed up with army cots, which was good. The service groups and churches were all alerted. They were going to make food, prepare food, and the whole deal. The school was going to be used for sleeping quarters and showering and washroom facilities. The Lions Center was going to be used to feed them all. For how long? Who knows? The answer to that was, okay, what else? Come on, bring it on. So that evening, my wife, she went to the school. She changed her kindergarten classroom into a daycare and a nursery. She knew that was going to happen. I went down, I grabbed a bunch of students, went down to the gym and put out all the old gym mats and all of the sleeping stuff that we collected from town and hoped for the best, and nobody came. They were still on the plane. They were on the tarmac waiting to be processed. We didn't know. This was a failure in logistics for us, so we stayed up all night waiting for visitors. First night of no sleep. There were 3 more. So we were informed the next morning we were going to get one plane load of passengers, Delta 49 from Frankfurt, Germany, en route to Cincinnati, and we had thought we were prepared to meet them. We had food, we had supplies. Walmart came, filled the place with toilet tissue, paper towels, face cloths, towels, baby wipes, baby diapers, body wash, deodorant, toothpaste, toothbrushes, whatever we needed. Walmart came in, Salvation Army came in, we were stocked. We fooled ourselves. We weren't ready for what happened. So I didn't know that the passengers hadn't been informed of everything that was going on. They had been given some information that there was an incident in New York. And as a result of the incident, the planes were diverted to Gander. So, stupid me, I had the television, the big screen television going in the library, and when the American group of passengers came in, they hit a beeline for the library, and when they saw the news cycle, it was like somebody sucked all the energy and oxygen out of the room. It was gone. And then, next thing you know, there's sobs, a few screams, and then where are the telephones? Telephones weren't working. All the telephone lines were blocked. Cell service at that time in Norris Arm was archaic. Cell service today in Norris Arm still sucks. Sorry, but it's true. I was affectionately known as the administrator of the computer lab. Kids called me the computer room janitor. And so everybody wanted to get in contact with their folks. The easiest way was by email. I gave them all passwords to enter onto my network. We had a little satellite dish on top. We put 2 students on the roof with tinfoil hats, and away we went. And they were all able to get a hold of their families, their companies. We had people from, where do we have people? We had people from Africa, African nations, India, Israel, the Arab nations, England, Germany, and the USA as well. There was no language barrier, of course. There was a lot of this, a lot of that, a lot of drawing of pictures, and when all else failed, as in rural Newfoundland, we served them food. Food, that was the main thing. That fixed everything. One of the passengers was walking down the hall and she cried, she cried for 3.5 days. Oh, back and forth, back and forth. She was a young woman just married and she just cried and cried and cried. And every time she cried, somebody says, "Come here, my ducky, come on, we have a cup of tea and a bun," right? She gained about 4 pounds. It was a riot in that. I think the story of the loaves and fishes originated in Norris Arm. Because in times of crisis, of course, rural Newfoundland has one solution. We feed everybody. And that's true. I mean, when boats would go down, they would drag everybody, off the ice or off the shore or whatever, to bring them in to give them a cup of tea and food. That made them feel better. And it's still the same today. That's the way it goes. One of the passengers said to me, he said, "I've never seen so much food." And he said, "It's all free." He said, tables full of food all the time, and no table ever emptied. For the 3.5 days they were there, not a table emptied. I'm not finished yet. I've been down this road before. Okay. And it was berry season. So we had cakes and we had muffins and we had blueberry crumble coming out of the woodwork. And the passengers went home well fed and with recipes in their back pocket. All right, I got enough. Can I tell one more little one? Please, just a little one. Okay, so it has to do with the language and food, of course. My wife and this German passenger, they were sitting in the staff room because that was a place where they would go and they would talk quietly and they'd talk about their families and stuff like that. So this German passenger was teaching my wife some unsavory German language. She was failing miserable at it and she was making it worse than it really sounded. Anyway, two of the local women were in. They were sisters-in-laws, and they were used to, brattling back and forth all the time. And I was making coffee, probably the 50th or 100th pot of coffee I'd made in those days, and I was just wiped because I hadn't slept. God is my judge. I had 2.5 hours sleep in 4.5 days, full days, and I was numb. And these two women were there, and I was making coffee, and I wasn't thinking. I could hear the German and the other language my wife was trying to speak in the background. And the two women started, and they started to talk, of course, in the colloquial language of Outport, Newfoundland. Because before that, they were all watching, and they were trying to speak proper English so that the tourists would understand them. Anyway, they started, and they were doing tea and putting out more buns on the table and more cake and that. And I turned around, and the German passenger's eyes were like this. Yeah, what language are they speaking? And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.